The Berlin Wall came crashing down. Statues of Lenin toppled. Then in 1991, the Soviet Union just dissolved. The West, with the USA leading the charge, had apparently won the Cold War. Democracy and capitalism, we were told, had triumphed over communism. That's the story we all learned, right? The one splashed across headlines and etched in textbooks. But what if that victory, that seemingly clear-cut win, wasn't so absolute? What if the celebrations were a bit premature? Fast forward a few decades, and the world we live in is not exactly the peaceful, democratic paradise many expected. Instead, we're dealing with a whole mess of unexpected, often shocking consequences that are still messing with our world today in ways nobody saw coming. So the real question isn't just who won, but what did that victory actually unleash? Now, let's rewind back to the end of the 20th century, the Cold War's final days. As the Soviet Union started to crumble, there was this prevailing feeling that the world was changing in a big way. Many folks, especially in the Western camp, genuinely believed that democracy and free market capitalism had come out on top. It was like the end of a long, intense game. The West had held its ground and emerged victorious. At least that's how it was painted. And for a while, it seemed like that narrative was playing out in real time. Eastern Bloc countries were shedding their communist skins. Economies were opening up, trade barriers were crumbling, and people were getting a taste of freedom and democracy for the first time. It really did feel like the world was becoming a better, more open place. But here's the thing. History rarely plays out as neat and tidy as we'd like to remember it. And while the end of the Cold War was indeed a significant moment, it wasn't the straightforward win for the West that many believe. In fact, there were forces at play that even the victors didn't fully grasp. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that might surprise you. While the fall of the Soviet Union was undoubtedly a major turning point, it's important to remember that the Cold War narrative, as we know it, is a Western perspective. Perspectives are important because they shape how we understand history. The dominant narrative often leaves out the complexities and challenges faced by the other side. It's easy to see the Soviet Union's collapse as a clear victory for the West. After all, it marked the end of a decades-long standoff. The relaxation of international tensions and the removal of a major global rival, the triumph of democracy and capitalism seemed undeniable. And yet that perspective overlooks the struggles, achievements, and contributions of the Soviet Union and its allies during those same years. For instance, many in the West often fail to recognize the significant scientific, technological, and cultural advancements made by the Soviet Union. During the Cold War era, the Soviets made substantial strides in areas such as space exploration, nuclear energy, and philosophy. They achieved milestones that challenged Western supremacy and advanced the progress of humanity. For example, they launched the first satellite into space, Sputnik 1, marking a pivotal moment in the space race. They also developed the first nuclear-powered icebreaker, Archimedes, showcasing their expertise in engineering and technology. In addition to scientific achievements, the Soviet Union made significant contributions to philosophy and intellectual thought. Thinkers like Alexander Zinoviev and Roy Medvedev offered critiques of Soviet society and explored themes of freedom, totalitarianism, and the human condition. Their ideas, while often suppressed within the Soviet Union, resonated with intellectuals in the West and contributed to broader philosophical discussions of the time. It's not just about what they achieved, but also about how those achievements challenged the prevailing narratives of the Cold War. The Soviet Union's successes forced the West to acknowledge and respond to their advancements, pushing them to innovate and improve. This competition resulted in a ripple effect, driving both sides to push the boundaries of knowledge and explore new frontiers. So when we talk about winning the Cold War, we can't just focus on military victories or political dominance. We have to acknowledge the full picture. The Soviet Union may have lost the war, but they didn't just disappear from the world stage. Instead, they left behind a legacy of achievement and contributions that deserve recognition. It's a reminder that history is complex and that understanding it requires looking beyond simplistic narratives. It means acknowledging the strengths and achievements of all sides involved and recognizing that the end of one era does and erase the impact of what came before. And speaking of erasing, let's dive into another intriguing aspect of the Cold War's aftermath. Have you ever wondered about the fascinating strategies employed by the United States and the Soviet Union to influence and control the flow of information during those tense decades? Well, join me on an eye-opening journey as we uncover the covert operations and propaganda campaigns that these superpowers unleashed. Now, as the dust settled on the Cold War and the Soviet Union found itself on the brink of collapse, a pivotal moment in history unfolded. A small group of scholars and policymakers convened in Washington, D.C., birthing what came to be known as the Project for the New American Century, or PNAC, established in 1997. This influential group comprised individuals from various backgrounds, including academics, political strategists, and experts in international relations. Among them were some familiar names, like Paul Wolfowitz, Richard Pearl, and Robert Kagan. The PNAC's primary objective was to chart a bold new course for American foreign policy, ensuring the nation's global dominance in the post-Cold War era. They envisioned a proactive and assertive United States committed to advancing democracy and free market capitalism across the world. However, as history would unfold, the PNAC's vision went far beyond these stated goals, encompassing a series of actions and policies that would profoundly shape the geopolitical landscape. As the project gained momentum, its members began articulating a more ambitious agenda. Central to their thinking was the promotion of American values abroad, particularly democracy and free market economics. The PNAC advocated for a concerted effort to spread democracy around the globe, seeing it as a bulwark against the resurgence of authoritarianism and a means to promote stability and peace. They believed that by fostering democratic institutions and free market economies in other nations, the United States could reduce the likelihood of conflict and advance its own national interests. Moreover, the PNAC recognized the strategic importance of containing regional powers that could potentially rival American influence. This perspective led to a more aggressive stance toward countries such as China, which the project identified as a growing economic and military competitor. Members of the PNAC expressed concerns about China's rise and advocated for measures to counter its influence, particularly in East Asia. They argued that containing China's growth was crucial to maintaining American hegemony in the region and preventing a shift in the balance of power. However, perhaps the most controversial aspect of the PNAC's agenda was its approach to the Middle East. The project's scholars advocated for a more confrontational policy toward countries such as Iraq, which they viewed as harboring weapons of mass destruction and supporting terrorism. The PNAC's report, Rebuilding America's Defenses, published in 2000, outlined a stark warning, stating that unless the United States acted forcefully to address emerging challenges, its enemies would grow bolder and more dangerous. This influential document served as a blueprint for the Bush administration's subsequent policies in the region. The PNAC's ideas played a pivotal role in shaping the public discourse surrounding the war in Iraq. Culminating in the U.S.-led invasion in 2003, the project's members, including Paul Wolfowitz, were among the most ardent advocates for the war, arguing that removing Saddam Hussein from power would not only enhance American prestige, but also advance the cause of democracy in the Middle East. Nevertheless, the PNAC's influence extended beyond the realm of foreign policy. Its members actively engaged in promoting conservative values and ideas across the United States. Through conferences, publications, and think tanks, the PNAC became a hub for scholars and policymakers seeking to advance neoconservative principles. However, as time passed, the PNAC faced criticism and its influence gradually waned. The Iraq War's aftermath, which saw protracted conflicts and instability in the region, raised questions about the neoconservative approach. The project's key figures, including Richard Pearl, stepped away from the public eye, leaving a legacy that was both influential and controversial. Today, as we reflect on the PNAC's historical significance, it's crucial to examine the lasting impact of its ideas. The project's emphasis on promoting democracy and free market capitalism undoubtedly shaped American foreign policy in the early 21st century. Moreover, the PNAC's approach to containing regional powers such as China had implications for U.S.-China relations and the broader balance of power in Asia. Ultimately, The PNAC's legacy serves as a reminder of the evolving nature of foreign policy and the enduring influence of neoconservative thought on American global engagement. Well, there you have it. From the ashes of the Cold War rose a new kind of conflict, a struggle to define the world order without an old familiar enemy. The fall of the Soviet Union, far from being a clean break, left behind a legacy of uncertainty and unforeseen consequences. Perhaps the greatest surprise of all is that the victors themselves didn't quite know how to navigate the world they had reshaped.